The word that we find in John chapter 6 over and over again is a word that we find all throughout the New Testament and certainly the Gospels that most translators have translated into English, believe. Believe. But as North Americans in the year 2024, when we hear the word believe, culturally we are trained to think about what we see, what we feel, and what we know. Do you believe in something? The actual Greek word here is pistis or pisteo. And in the ancient language, pistis or pisteo has an element of faith and belief, but the deeper meaning is trust. Is trust. What would change about our walk of faith if instead of every time we encounter the word believe, we replaced it with trust? I love this passage. If you were here last week or the week before or the week before that, you might be thinking, this sounds a little bit familiar. Because for the last 4 weeks, we have been journeying through John chapter 6, the bread of life discourse. For 4 weeks, we have been struggling and wrestling with this confusing, confounding, mysterious, inspiring teaching from Jesus. And here we get a little bit more context to the situation surrounding the teaching. We're only told in the 4th week that Jesus is sharing this teaching in Capernaum in the synagogue. Imagine, if you will, for a moment, if I stood up here as a faith leader in a normal weekend celebration of our faith, and my message in my sermon was, you need to eat my flesh and drink my blood. No, really, Ken, you take a bite. You would probably be feeling and thinking something similar to what the audience that was in the synagogue felt and thought that morning. This has gone too far. This is getting a little weird. I was with you for a while, but now I think I'm going to go down to Kenwood Baptist, or maybe to, Knox Presbyterian, or maybe I'll check out Hyde Park United Methodist. I might even go back to the Catholic Church. This is just getting a little strange. We know that people struggled with this teaching. And not just people who didn't know Jesus. We're told on the 4th week that his own disciples, those that had been following him, were bought into the vision he was casting, the ministry he was doing. They say, these are the breaks, that's the end of the road. Jesus, you're kind of woo-woo, like you're floating in outer space right now. I don't understand this. And then we have this beautiful interaction where Jesus turns to the 12, those that he was investing in the most, those who were following him most closely, and he says to them point blank, do you also want to go away? Like, are you done too? And Peter has this beautiful line, Lord, to whom shall we go? Where can we go? You have the words of eternal life. It's this beautiful statement. And yet, so many other people, I think, were struggling with this teaching, and were struggling with a lot of what Jesus was doing because they couldn't believe in it. How do you make sense of what he's saying? I think that people probably wanted to believe in his teaching, but they just couldn't. I think a lot of people, a lot of us, we struggle with this idea of belief. I think we all can own the fact that our faith journeys are marked by both moments of feeling strong belief, having core convictions, understanding who God is, and then moments when we just really struggle with all of it. The last few weeks, I feel like I have gotten a master class myself in understanding nuances surrounding belief. Last week, I preached a sermon a little bit about the summer, the end of summer, and how Brianna, our daughter, was away at camp. And I told a story about taking the boys to Kings Island and an adventuresome day. And a lot of you thought it was going to end in me getting sick on the roller coasters. But the sermon was about filling ourselves with good things, things that actually satisfy. Something else was happening, though, for the last few weeks of summer, related to Brianna being at camp. So I shared that our daughter went away for the very first time. Now, some of you are parents and you're a little bit more seasoned than I am. You have older children. You've been down this road before. But for me, this was the very first time that my baby girl was away from home. She's 11 years old. Before going to this summer camp, she had maybe been away from home at most 12 hours for like a sleepover. But yet here we were about ready to take her to a camp out of state in Pennsylvania. And it was one of those camps where they're not allowed to call home. They have no technology. There would be no contact other than if our 11-year-old daughter wrote us a letter. To make matters worse, I didn't get to drop her off. I decided to stay home with Noah and Luke, and Grandma and Becca drove her to Pennsylvania. They had to get up really early in the morning and drive the 5.5 hours to camp. I'm told that when they arrived at camp, Brianna was the first one in cabin 3. I get the phone call, she's in cabin 3, and I'm trying to imagine what cabin 3 looks like, and I can't be there, and all I know is she's the only camper there, and I'm thinking, oh no, is she going to be scared? She doesn't have any friends. Will she make friends? My mind is just racing about my little girl. Grandma calls me and says, after a half hour, 45 minutes, they shoo all of the families off the camp. Get out of here. They had to drive the 5.5 hours back. And now I'm a little bit of a nervous wreck, thinking about my daughter. Is she having a good time? Is she okay? Is she safe? Is she being polite? Is she being kind? Is she making friends? I so desperately, the 2 weeks Brianna was away at camp, wanted to believe that Brianna was having a great time, that she was safe, that she was okay. I really wanted to believe it. And I kept finding myself over the time she was away at camp, searching for that belief, wanting to base that belief around one of 3 things. I wanted to see Brianna. But the only way I could see her was through this thing called Instagram. The camp didn't have a Facebook account, they didn't have a Twitter account, but they had an Instagram account. And we were told on the little parent handout, keep checking Instagram and maybe you'll see a photo of your kiddo at camp. Every other hour, I found myself pulling out my phone, going to Summer's Best 2 weeks, clicking on the thing, and like a teenage boy, like scrolling through, like, oh my, and one day, it was like day 4, I'm like, that's her arm. I know her arm. That is her arm. It's this beautiful blonde hair. I can't see her face, but that's her. I'm like, Becca, look, that's her arm. She's like, I don't think that's, I'm like, that's her arm. And when I saw her arm, when I could see her arm, I had peace for about 10 minutes. And then I found myself like the next day, like, why haven't they posted more photos? I want to see her. I won't believe she's okay unless I see her again. The second week, there she was in the swimming pool. I didn't see her face, but I saw her Marymount swimming cap. And I'm like, that's her. I believe she's fine. For about 15 minutes. And then I started worrying again. I won't believe it unless we know how this works. There was another way, though, that I kept trying to rest and take comfort in the belief she was fine, and it was based on my feelings. Do you know what that's like? I'd be driving to work and I'd be thinking about her, wondering what she's eating for breakfast, and I'd just be overwhelmed with a feeling that she was fine, that she's probably happy. And often those feelings were actually based off of my feelings, how I was feeling that day. And even for those few moments that I felt like she was fine, well, we know what happens with feelings, don't we? They don't last. Feelings come and go, and so one moment I felt at peace in my heart about my daughter, and the next moment I'm overcome with anxiety and worry. She's not here. She's 11 years old, right at that age, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if she didn't put on deodorant this morning? What if she's not being kind? What if? And then the feelings changed. I couldn't believe that Brianna was safe because of my feelings. And the third way that I was searching to believe she was fine was nearly impossible. I wanted knowledge that she was fine. I wanted the camp director or her counselor, Jenna, to send me personal text messages. Brianna is fine today. She ate 2 eggs and 3 slices of bacon. She has a full stomach. I wasn't going to get that from summer camp. And as I started thinking about my journey with my daughter away, being worried and overprotective dad, I started to see this bigger picture. That what I was doing with Brianna is so often what I do with God, what I do with belief in general. You see, so often we believe things about God or the world based off of what we see, what we feel, and what we know. We build our lives and our belief systems around what we see, what we feel, and what we know. And this, I think, is precisely why the disciples are struggling with Jesus in John chapter 6. They can't see what Jesus is talking about. When they try to picture what Jesus is talking about, they get grossed out. Eat your body, drink your blood. I can't see that you are like better manna than what our ancestors had in the wilderness. Their feelings are not filled with hope and joy and peace in this moment. They're feeling a multitude of things, anxiety and mystery and disgust. And they certainly did not have the knowledge that Jesus was who he said he was. And so many people turn away from following him. As I dug into this and started looking at it, I went back to my Greek New Testament and started to parse out the words, and it hit me. I'm going to make a bold statement. I believe that most English Bible translators have led us astray when it comes to this one word. The word that we find in John chapter 6 over and over again is a word that we find all throughout the New Testament, and certainly the Gospels, that most translators have translated into English, believe. Believe. But as North Americans in the year 2024, when we hear the word believe, culturally we are trained to think about what we see, what we feel, and what we know. Do you believe in something? The actual Greek word here is pistis, or pisteo. And in the ancient language, pistis or pisteo has an element of faith and belief, but the deeper meaning is trust. Is trust. What would change about our walk of faith if instead of every time we encounter the word believe, we replaced it with trust? Do you believe in the Son of Man? sounds very different than do you trust the Son of Man? I came to a place in the second week of Brianna being away at camp where I couldn't see, I couldn't feel, and I couldn't know that she was okay. I was forced to trust that she was okay, to trust that God was with her, to trust that she was being filled with faith, to trust that even in her difficult moments at camp, in the end, they would be good for her. You see, I don't think Jesus is all that consumed with what people believe, head knowledge. I don't think he's that consumed with what people can see. I don't even think he's that consumed with what people feel. But over and again, when we encounter Jesus in the Gospels, I think what he's actually doing is inviting people to trust him. Trust is never built off of what we see, what we feel, or what we know. Trust necessitates faith. Trust necessitates that we give up control, that we don't have a clear picture. Belief works for us like a 10,000 lumen light. We would love to have this huge spotlight to see in the far distance. Trust is like having a flashlight with AA batteries. You can only see a few steps in front of you if you can see it all. And yet, time and time again, what Jesus is doing is inviting people to trust him. Think about those disciples, those brothers on the side of the Sea of Galilee mending their nets. When Jesus walks along, this new rabbi, and he invites them to come and fish for people. I don't think they could see, feel, or know what they were in for. They had to trust him. They had to trust him. Or when the disciples were on the boat and the waves were crashing in and the wind was at their back and they can't even see Jesus. They don't even know for a fact because of their sight that it's him. They feel all sorts of differing emotions, and yet Peter steps out of the boat, not because he had the knowledge that he wouldn't drown. He steps out of the boat because he trusted in Jesus. The healing of Jairus' daughter, the raising of Lazarus, time and time and time again, the stories of Jesus are stories of inviting people to trust him. The rich young ruler, Jesus does not ask him, do you have head knowledge that I am who I say I am? He invites him to let go of the things he was trusting to trust in Christ's ability to care for him. When you look back at your life, and you look back at the things you've been through, I can guarantee that every person in this room has had very difficult moments when you wanted desperately to base your decisions in life around a belief. You wanted to see that by taking that new job, everything would work out. You've tried to make decisions in life based off of your emotions, and yet your emotions kept changing. I think I need to do this. I don't know if I should do this. You've made lists over the pros and cons, and you've tried to collect all of the knowledge and information in the world at the crossroads of your life. But I guarantee you that every person who has been through a major transition, whether it was the ending of a relationship, the taking of a new job, the switching and moving in a totally new direction, whatever crossroads you've been at, I guarantee you, belief is not what got you through it. It was trust. Because the reality is we don't have all the answers. We can't. We can't see the future. And if we base every decision we make around our feelings, well then Lord knows we'll make so many different decisions every day of the week. I think what Jesus is offering us is a relationship built off of trust. Will you trust me with your heart? Will you trust me that I am a God who wants to care for you, who will not leave you or abandon you, who will never forsake you? Will you trust that if you do the hard thing, I will be with you right there next to you? It's trust. It's trusting a God who has gone before us, who has experienced the worst. It's trusting not in a God who lives in the clouds that we can't relate to. It's trusting a God that came to earth, experienced our pain, knew what it was like to have friends leave him, abandon him, betray him. It's trusting in a Jesus who knows what it's like to be hurt, to grieve, to mourn, to cry out, to want a different path than the path he has to walk. You see, Jesus never invites us into a relationship when he himself has not had to live into that same relationship with God the Father. It was trust that Jesus had to embody when he said, not this cup, I don't want to drink it, but not my will, your will be done. What would change about our relationship with Christ if we built everything around this idea of trust? And we let go of the notion that we have to have all the knowledge, all the answers. I think we'd experience so much more grace when we doubt. We'd make room for our insecurities. We'd truly be guided by grace. Grace. So my prayer for you, whether you feel certain the path you're walking, or maybe you're like someone else in the sanctuary today and you feel like once again you are at a crossroads in your life. There is something you're wrestling with, something you're struggling with, and you need direction to move forward. Maybe it's simply extending a hand as Christ extends his hand to you, saying, come and follow me. Come and trust. I will be with you every day. Amen.